So if you can have failure plus self-compassion, that is actually the winning formula for success. And it's such a paradox. Like, I'm sure people listening to this are like, failure plus self-compassion? Like, absolutely not, right? But in fact, that is what we see.
Welcome back to the Athletic Performance Podcast. The voice you just heard is Dr. Krista Scott-Dixon, someone who has helped redefine what it means to coach humans through hard things. And in today's conversation, we unpack exactly how that paradox, failure plus compassion, can become your biggest asset as a coach, athlete, or even just a person trying to do better. Dr. Krista Scott-Dixon has done it all. She's the former director of curriculum at Precision Nutrition, where she created some of the most respected coaching certifications in the industry, including PN Level 1 and Level 2, plus specialized certs in sleep, stress, recovery, menopause, and even pre- and postnatal training. She's also a trained counselor with a wide range of tools, from CBT and DPT to trauma-informed work and motivational interviewing. These days, Krista serves as the product director at Simple, a nutrition app with a global user base, and she runs her own project, the 1% Better Academy, while also coaching tactical and special operations candidates through building the elite. In this episode, we go deep on why high performers, from elite athletes to special operators, benefit more from self-compassion than punishment, the fine line between productive discomfort and destructive stress, how to coach clients without robbing them of their autonomy, why most goal-setting strategies miss the mark, and what to do instead, the sneaky ways that we as coaches accidentally reinforce body image issues in female athletes, and how to build identity-driven, resilient athletes in a world full of distractions and comparison traps. This conversation is packed with insight, experience, and the kind of real talk that'll change how you coach tomorrow. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I followed your work for even longer. So it's just, I guess being in the game long enough, we have a bunch of mutual connects who can kind of bring us together. So thank you for carving the time, first and foremost, to do this. I'm very honored for everyone who can make time in their schedule.
Oh, no, I'm glad. Thank you for inviting me and having me, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Yeah, so I guess just for a quick intro for people who aren't familiar with you and your work, can you give us the Cliff Notes version of you up to now?
Oof, all right. Well, I guess what I'd say is I've been teaching and coaching in some format 25 plus years at this point. So started in the mid 1990s. So I guess we're pushing 30. Anyway, let's skip over that part. But but basically, coach, educator, researcher, and curriculum designer in a wide range of topics. But most recently in the field of like health and nutrition and wellness, a lot in women's health. I started out talking about weight training, strength training. Now I've kind of evolved more into performance psychology. So I work. My day job is I work with an app that does like AI coaching, especially for nutrition and stuff like that. And so I advise on the coaching methodology. I work with Girls Gone Strong, doing some curriculum design.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my own little side hustle, which I call the 1% Better Academy. So I'm kind of like teaching, coaching, researching in the health and wellness nutrition field. And I've been doing that for a number of years. And obviously I was also the curriculum designer at Precision Nutrition for a number of years. So like writing the certifications, writing their coaching programs and that kind of stuff, helping design their software. So it's kind of been like a whole mix of everything for the past 25, 30 years, somewhere in this domain of like health, fitness, nutrition, wellness, performance, behavior change, that kind of stuff, just in different incarnations of it.
Yeah, I'll start with a confession. I've been eating an obscene amount of cake because my twins just had their 10th birthday.
All
And
right.
we had a recent death in the family. So, of course, people are bringing over a bunch of food. And it's just been an inappropriate amount. So I'm sure AI would have some interesting things to say to me. Of course.
Well, we try to train AI not to judge. So
just kind of feed it the self-compassion textbook, right?
That's it. That's it. Always compassion first. That's like I don't have a lot of rules, but that's the one I'm really rigid about. Like always compassion and empathy first. You don't have anything else if you don't have that.
I'm sure we're going to circle back to that, but one
Hmm.
of the areas I definitely want to dive into today is going to be, the mental and psychological aspects of performance, and that could be anything. So specifically, I want to refer back to your Building the Elite podcast. You discuss preparing special operations candidates for high stress environments. And that, in some respects, can be not so different from athletes who are in high performance environments, or even CEOs, or somebody who's in a professional setting. But I know from my perspective, a lot of the athletes that I work with and their team sport coaches, we kind of put the special operations and the SEALs on this pedestal as like, this is the gold standard for what it means to be tough. And so we try to manufacture this into their training, right? So, but I think I always say it's a little more nuanced than just like camo, a bad attitude, and Zin pouches, which is what I tend to see. So, um, what is a practical mental strategy that an average athlete or coach can use to handle the everyday stress of high performance environments or setbacks?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the first thing I'll say about that, so for context, which I didn't kind of really mention in my bio, is that I have been working with a lot of these high performance military, tactical, first responders, that kind of group of people on their performance psychology. And, one of the most interesting lessons that I've learned is exactly what you described. We tend to think of these people as super tough, like bulletproof humans, almost superhuman in a way. In reality, what they actually benefit most from, and in a way, is that self-compassion piece, which may sound crazy because we're like, oh no, like shouldn't they be super tough and really like strong and all this? But in fact, self-compassion is the mediating variable in a lot of these situations, because I think the one thing that people don't really necessarily realize is that most of the time, as in high performance occupations, you are not succeeding, you are failing. Well, we put that in quotations, but like you are in situations that are typically no-win situations, extremely difficult, painful, at the limits of your performance. So most of the time, you are not gold star performing. You are failing or sucking or things are terrible. And so actually what special ops training involves is not you being a superstar. If you come in, even if you come in and you're a superstar, they're like, great, you can do 500 push-ups. Cool, go do 1,000. Go do it in the pouring rain. Go do it in the ocean, surf until you're hypothermic, right? So they will find the conditions under which you will fail. And then they work from there. They look at the person that you are. And so circling back to like how we can apply this to our just regular people athletes, one of the most important things is like getting people really comfortable with, again, I'm putting this in quotes, failing and sucking, and not in a sadistic way, right? Not like, oh, I'm going to make you go and destroy yourself. More like, I want to show you that you can be okay with not succeeding. Now, we all want to succeed. Obviously, go for it, right? Shoot for the stars, seek mastery, seek excellence, but understand that 95 to 99.9% of that is going to involve pain, failure, sucking, frustration, and all of these things. And so effectively, you're training. I joke that you're training to be a master of failure. That's really what you're working with. So it kind of flips the traditional idea on its head of athletic training, like, oh, we're training people to succeed. But I think as a coach, especially when you're working with younger athletes, to normalize difficulty, struggle, setbacks, trying something, screwing it up, falling on your face, that I think is a super powerful lesson. And that's what builds resilience. So if you can have failure plus self-compassion, that is actually the winning formula for success. And it's such a paradox. Like, I'm sure people listening to this are like, failure plus self-compassion, like, absolutely not, right? But in fact, that is what we see. And so, yeah, that's the first piece. I mean, I have other ideas too, but I'll stop there for reactions and clarifying questions.
No, I think that's a great thing to build off of. And one of the things that comes to mind with me is this, the sweet spot of how much failure, right? So from my perspective as
Yes.
a coach for young athletes, motor learning comes to mind, right? We want a certain level of failure that's going to allow this athlete to actually, teach their brains what to do right. And so my counter question is, how do we distinguish between, productive discomfort and destructive stress in a performance setting?
Yeah, such a great question. Such a great question. I feel like this is the question. Right? And there's some evidence, like someone has figured this out mathematically, that like a certain percentage of struggle and difficulty is like the sweet spot, right? Like it has to be hard, but not overwhelmingly hard. And my guess is that it's probably different for every individual athlete too. So this is where being client-centered comes in, right? Which means that you understand the individual features of each athlete or client that you're working with, and you understand how to sort of turn the dial up or turn the dial down for them. So for some athletes, they'll never meet enough failure to discourage them. They will run through a wall. They don't care, right? Other athletes may be very demotivated even with like a 10% failure rate, right? So for them, for the easily demotivated, the project is failure inoculation, right? You want to give them little tiny doses of failure within the container, and this is an important piece, within the container of a supportive, structured, healthy leadership kind of environment. Because I think the context is missing a lot of the time when people are like, well, you need a growth mindset. You require support to have a growth mindset. It's not just you in the wilderness, right? So step number one is find the right failure threshold for each athlete and offer it to them in a supportive, safe, secure, challenging environment. But like, it's kind of that like proverbial tough but fair football coach, right? He's got your back, he cares, but he is going to push you. He is going to kick your ass. Right? So exactly what that looks like will be different for every athlete. But the missing piece between destructive and productive failure is that context of support and structure and guidance. And I think, I say this as someone who's Gen X, we were left to our own devices. So we struggled, and that was not necessarily helpful or productive. Like we were missing the people who were like, here's how you do it. Let me support you in getting those skills. And then sure, yeah, go be independent. In our case, it was like, here's a house key, figure it out. So, bridging with your athletes, the skill development is also really crucial. Like, yeah, I'm going to give you a hard task, but I'm going to support you in especially those vulnerable early stages of skill development and execution. And I'm going to give you, I'll tell you one more piece, a really strong but small feedback loop. You're going to do a thing and you're going to get feedback. And then you're going to learn, and you're going to do a thing and you're going to get feedback, and then you're going to learn. And all of this is going to happen in the kind of growth medium of a supportive, secure environment. But I'm going to give you a really small feedback loop. It's not like those university courses where it's like you study all year and then there's a final exam that's 100%. That's not a good feedback loop, right? It should be the end of every class or the end of every week or whatever. So you want to give them really small feedback loops so they very closely connect. Okay, I did a thing at the edge of my ability in a supportive environment. I got this result, and then that becomes the cycle.
One of the things I joke about when it comes to some of this stuff of having just resilience for these little micro failures along the way is, you don't want to go full David Goggins, but you need just enough like trauma as a child that you've got
That's
a certain
right.
level of toughness. But getting this consistent feedback brings to mind jujitsu, which I know you've done and I do. And it's this eternal battle of feeling like it's your first day. But I think that skill for a lot of people who haven't done that, and I don't want to turn this into a full-on jujitsu conversation, but I don't think there, especially for highly athletic people, I don't think there's many activities out there that really bring to mind what it means to fail, or find this breaking point for you, because the positions, the diaphragmatic pressure, I mean, it can just incite panic in you like a way that you've never experienced. And I think it's such a valuable skill set. And I almost do it because I feel like I have to manufacture some of this for myself, because things can be easy living in America. But to really ask a question, for us as coaches, how could we actually model some of this emotional regulation and make sure that our athletes are well cared for and show support without falling into a trap of, say, over intellectualizing this?
Yeah, yeah. And I like that word over intellectualizing because really, like, the work is done through direct experience, right? Like, most of the work is not done through thinking. And one of the things I always tell my athletes and clients is only think on paper. So don't think, like, don't be hamstering in your head while you're doing an activity. While you're doing an activity, be present. And then do the thinking like with a whiteboard or with the paper. It's like, when you analyze the football plays, with the X's and O's and stuff like that, or you're like mapping out a game plan, like a flow chart. That's when you do your thinking, right? That's when you do the strategic problem solving, the planning, like all of that stuff. But when you're doing the thing, it's direct experience. And so, to kind of go back to your piece, like part of the training is balancing the thinking and the directly experiencing, right? Like, helping people be in the direct experience and attend to all of the parts of that. Like, what is happening? What is this like? What are my senses telling me? What is the experience of this? And then having that feedback loop where you kind of come out of it and go, okay, let's talk about the meta issues of like what that all meant. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but for me, it's like this kind of balance, because you get sometimes those athletes who just want to do stuff and not think. And then you get those athletes where it's all thinking all the time to the point where they're like immobilized and they can't perform. Okay? So for each athlete, you first of all have to identify what's the balance here. Um, and then how do I optimize it for each athlete? It's kind of like, how do I fill in the gaps for each athlete of what they actually need? And I think when you start to, because I think we're circling around a larger theme of like, what are the sweet spots, right? And I think when you tip too far in one direction or the other is when you don't have a balance of like a dialectic, or you don't understand that the dynamic needs to be nicely balanced and not it's either David Goggins, like you said, or it's total lie on the couch chaos, right? So I hope that makes sense, and feel free to follow up with any clarifying questions.
No, so I went through PN2, which, we'll circle back on the curriculum, but one of the thoughts that comes to mind, and one of the things that I really struggled with as a coach was being more of what I would call like a shepherd, right? Of leading the
Mm-hmm.
path for the athletes, but not actually walking it. Because I wanted success sometimes for my clients so much that I was like willing to put them on my shoulders and run across the finish line with them. And I learned along the way, like, this is really counterproductive to building autonomy for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's such an important point. And again, I think people often misinterpret the idea of what being client-centered means, right? They think it means like anything goes, or you show up and you're like, "Hey, man, what do you want to rap about today?" You know what I mean? Like your old hippie English teacher shows up with his guitar, right? Like, I think that's what people imagine being client-centered is like. But
Mm-hmm.
being client-centered means you have a very deep understanding of your client. What motivates them? What do they need? What do they want? What do they need even though they don't need it, or sort of realize it? You know what I mean? Like, you have a very deep understanding, and then you choose the tools in your coaching toolbox that is right for that client, right? So that precludes any kind of specific approach. Some clients will need and want and truly objectively benefit from a super directive approach. Now, those are the minority, like, because you'll get a lot of clients just showing up saying, "Tell me what to do. Just give me a meal plan. Just give me a workout plan. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it." It's like, no, you won't. You absolutely will not. Rookie mistake to give them the plan right off the bat until they've demonstrated that they really will do it. But you're always kind of finding that balance of directedness, and it's super important to let your clients have their pain. I was just working with a client, like, before I got on this call, who struggles a lot with all or nothing thinking. And, this is very, very common. So you probably, this is familiar to you too. And that if we try to get the all, we usually get the nothing. And then this is super frustrating, right? So either people don't do stuff because it's not perfect, or they do it and they get really upset because it's not perfect. It just generally sucks as an approach. But I can't just roll in and say, "Don't think that way. That's dumb and useless." To get them shifting off the all or nothing, I have to actually push them towards a little bit of pain there. Like, what has it cost you to do all of this all or nothing stuff? And the client's like, ooh, ouch. And you can just see them in real time, like confronting all of the painful things that this behavior has done for them, right? Like, oh my God, I lost this opportunity and I didn't do this, and I could have enjoyed this, but I didn't. And they're like, you're just watching them in real time, kind of like confront the darkness of the soul. And I can't take that from them because they need to experience that pain in order to consider alternatives. So yeah, it's super hard for coaches to, so the tricky thing that you learn as a coach is what's like the right amount of guidance and nudging and navigation and supporting that is not taking the pain, that is not taking the poo. And I will tell you this one story I like to tell coaches, which is that my partner is a bus driver and in like a downtown bus driver, right? So it's Wild West. Anything can happen. So one day someone comes up to him and hands him a bag of poo, like literal poo, a plastic bag of poo, and is like, someone left this on the bus. And my partner's like, what am I supposed to do with it? Like, I don't want it, right? But yet, so in real life, if someone just like handed us a random bag of poo, we'd be like, what? We would be like, ew, I'm not taking this, right? But in coaching, a lot of the time we walk around grabbing our clients' bags of poo, right? Let me take that from you. Let me take that pain. Oh no, that feels bad. Let me grab that from you, right? So I'm always telling coaches in training, do not pick up other people's poo. You pick up your own poo, they pick up their poo. It's a poo ecosystem that unfolds naturally, right?
Wow, I don't even know how I would respond to that. I think I just used this quote in a recent podcast, but it's just becoming more prevalent. I don't know if this is just where my headspace is, but it's like the burnt hand teaches best. So
Yes.
almost letting clients experience the hotness of the stove, but at the same time, maybe not holding their hand down on
That's
top
right.
of it to the point
Yes.
where they've got second-degree burns.
That's it. That's it exactly. And as a coach, one of your roles can be to help them attend to that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
notice it. And earlier I was kind of talking about like noticing cause and effect, because I think that is one of the problems. Like clients are getting outcomes and they're not sure why they're getting those outcomes. Either they have poor interoception, so they can't feel what's happening in their body, or their skill level is not high enough that they don't know what's wrong. So in jiu-jitsu, it's a great example. I just keep getting choked. I don't even know what's happening. And then as you get better, you're like, I just keep getting choked, but I know what's happening. I can't stop it, but I know how it's going to end up, right? So it can be a skill issue. It can be all kinds of reasons that they're not able to, or maybe the effect happens, too far out. Like if you eat a food that you don't tolerate well, it could be 4 or 5 hours before you notice the effect. So there's all kinds of reasons why we wouldn't necessarily notice cause and effect. And so one of our jobs can be to say to clients, hey, is your hand burning? Let's pause and attend to the sensations that you might be experiencing. And then let's kind of map out, what the relationship could be between what you did and the outcome you got. That's a great role for a coach, because often clients just don't connect those dots. They're just like, why is my hand hurting? Or maybe not even why is my hand hurting? My hand just doesn't even work. Like I haven't even noticed that it's hurting. It's just my hand just stopped working, right? So a great role for a coach is sort of like connecting the dots for people. Here's the thing you did. Here's the outcome you got. I wonder if you could try a different thing to get a different outcome.
Yeah, that's fabulous. One of the things you started on that I kind of want to dive into, I think can be really valuable. And this maybe sounds like an omission on my part of really helping as many athletes as I can. But I'm in a place now where we've kind of graduated from this, putting the clients on your back and really taking charge and doing everything for them to, I communicate with parents now, hey, we really want athletes who are on a path, athletes who have identified that they have a goal they would like to achieve. For some of our athletes, they're going to go to college to play sports. They're very gifted. They've got the work ethic. It's just the opportunities are there for them. Some are coming back from an injury. So their path is like, man, I missed a whole year with an ACL. Like I really want to get the most out of this experience and not have to deal with this again. And then there's other athletes who are like, gosh, like I just go to a really competitive school and I don't want to ride the bench. I want to be a contributor. So like I'm willing to do what it takes. But I feel like there's some kids who maybe the opportunity is there, but nobody has invited them into this
Mm.
possibility or into identifying what potential they have. So they've not even considered this world where they can feasibly level up many times. And so my question to you is, for these clients who maybe don't have this goal fixedness or have trouble with engagement as they go because maybe the path feels too long, what are some practical strategies that we can use to help these types of clients and athletes?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just capturing this because I think there's sort of two important pieces here. So one of them is like, what's people's relationship to goals, right? There are some people who never met a goal they didn't love, right? They love goals. They love sitting down, making goals, planning goals, spreadsheets of goals. Like they just love goals. And then when they accomplish a goal, they feel great and it's very satisfying. So they're all about goals. And unfortunately, a lot of those people also go into coaching, and then clients come in and they're like, okay, so what are your goals? Right? Like for them, goals are meaningful and enjoyable. And so they talk to their clients in that language too. Whereas a lot of clients don't have this relationship to goals, right? It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's not meaningful or relevant. So often you get kind of clashes in like the super goal people versus not. So one of the first things I like to do is kind of investigate like what is someone's actual relationship with goals. For some people, yes, chasing a very specific outcome is quite meaningful and motivating. For other people, we want to talk about something more like a hopeful future. What would you like to be doing? What is, if you can imagine a best case outcome, what is in your image? Like, what do you actually see when you have this outcome? What is the imaginative image that you have? What do you want to feel? What feeling do you want to get? Do you want to feel more confident? Do you want to feel accomplished, satisfied, energized, engaged? Like, what is the feeling that you would like to have? So the first thing to do is like figure out, does someone want a specific outcome goal, bench press this amount of weight, run this fast, win this thing, whatever? Or is it more of a hopeful future, like a vision? And then how do we take both of these and put them into behavior goals? So what is it you will be doing in order to move towards this hopeful future or move towards this goal? And that's when I bust out my classic 4-circle exercise, which is just basically drawing 4 circles with arrows connecting them. And so and then working backwards. So kind of using a backwards design model. So here's the outcome. Here's the hopeful future. Okay, cool. Let's write that down on the whiteboard. Then, what are you prepared to do this month? Or what do you need to do this month to work towards that? What do you need to do this week? Or what are you willing to do this week to work towards that? And what does today look like? So what are you ready, willing, and able to do today to move towards that? And this is really helpful because it breaks it down into something super actionable, but it also shows people how everything they do relates to this thing. And then you can also almost use that like a decision filter too, right? Does this thing that you're doing move you closer to the hopeful future or further away from it, right? So you were talking earlier about like eating too much cake, right? So with a client, we wouldn't say, oh no, eating too much cake is bad and wrong and blah, blah, blah. What we would say is like, look, your goal, was to get to 8% body fat. Where does eating cake, vast amounts of cake fit into this movement towards the hopeful future? Is it a little side quest that maybe you need to do for a week and that's completely fine? Is it, something that actively tracks because then you eat a cake and then you eat, I don't know, 5 more cakes and you have some beer? Like, does it send you actively away from this hopeful future? But what's the relationship between what you're doing today and right now and your hopeful future? And this is really helpful for young athletes in particular, because younger people, as their brains develop, they're not good at long-term action planning, right? They're very much immediate. So if we can give them a rubric about like, what are you doing right now? And how does this connect to what you want? And repeat that like reinforce the heck out of it. It helps them build the skill of goal-directed behavior that is working towards something that's not happening right now. It also puts the onus on their behaviors, right? You have to do something to get to this outcome. So you can want to be whatever percent body fat, to have an amazing bench press, to whatever, but you have to do something in order to move towards that. And I think that's also a really powerful message, especially for younger athletes who childhood is and youth is such a powerless time, right? Everyone's in your business telling you what to do when you're young. Go to school, be on this schedule, go to practice at this time. So to kind of put that little bit of empowerment into the young athlete's hands and say, look, you can choose to show up or not. You can choose to have a good attitude or not. There are these behavioral things that you can do that will get you towards your goal. I think that actually starts to build self-efficacy, it starts to build empowerment, it starts to build a sense of agency and responsibility, again, within this context of support. So all of those things I think are, a really important part of the process. And I think one of the gaps that happens for a lot of people is they set a goal and then there's it's kind of like the underpants gnomes from South Park, where it's it's steel underpants and then there's profit, but like the step in the middle is like a question mark. I think that's kind of like how a lot of people approach goals. The part in the middle is they just haven't really thought it through. So I think that helps us get out of that a little bit.
That really helps me because I think probably in this industry, there's a lot of goal-oriented people. But it takes me out of overly relying on structure for goals of having checklists or to-dos and connecting to the psychology of the identity of the person and maybe the emotions that they're experiencing and actually bridging the gap. And the way you describe these circles, I almost think of the nesting dolls, like, okay, this is the big goal, and then this would be this month, and then this would be this week, and then, oh, here's today, and like, this is really small and manageable, and you can do this. And so it just, for me, like that bridge is so powerful. I don't know, is what I'm experiencing pretty common from people who are in a role like mine? I feel like the majority of the people I talk to, like, yeah, like making goals makes perfect sense. Like, duh.
Yeah, totally. And I think, part of this too is sort of like a North American Anglo culture approach too, where everything is very kind of left brainy. I know left brain, right brain isn't really scientifically accurate, but I think that we kind of understand intuitively what this means, right? I think that we have a very detached left brain approach to doing a lot of things, and we try to separate things out and structuralize them and put them into boxes and sort them and organize them, right? Very left brain activities. But the thing about motivation and inspiration and drive is that a huge proportion of that it comes from some intangible, more right brain place, right? Creativity, joy, passion, drive. Like, why do you fall in love? Like that kind of stuff, right? What fires you up? Where in the world do you want to visit that you cruise photos of it? And you're like, oh, that's so cool. You can't break any of that down into mathematical formula. But the thing about that is it's way more compelling. So if we can tap into those intangible, creative, emotional, felt sense parts of people, identity, that's what keeps them motivated. That's what keeps them driven. And so I like to use a lot of like right brain techniques, imagery, story writing and storytelling, characters in movies. I like to use ChatGPT a lot to create images of people's hopeful future. So they'll describe it to me and then I'll create an image and I'm like, this is you. And they're like, oh, wow. Like it gives them an imaginative hook to hook onto. And it's so much more sustainably motivating than like, good for you, you checked off, 200 watts on the whatever. Like, no, that's not what gets you out of bed in the morning. So that for me would be the secret. And it's not either or, right? You can use these more specific goal processes to work towards the vision, but you can't flip them. The left brain does not inspire. It never. I mean, maybe there's some accountant out there that's getting fired up by their spreadsheet, but ultimately the part that inspires us is this holistic, global, emotional, intuitive, felt sense part. So leverage that as much as possible. And like kids are and young people are like wildly creative. So like draw me a picture, make me a song, like create something that to you imaginatively captures this destination that you're going for. I mean, first of all, you'll get some amazing things. You'll probably discover some kid you thought was just a regular kid is actually like a gifted comic book artist who creates an entire comic book about their hopeful future, right? I mean, so it lets you get to know people better, but it's also people come up with stuff you never would have thought of for them. And they tap into that drive that goes way, way deeper, and it's so much more sustainable.
Yeah, I think that part of me was long dormant. Now my wife, her whole family is in the arts. So born, bred, raised as dance studio owners, and the kids we have are in musical theater. So it is a
Yeah,
whole different world of just me learning that side of it. And unfortunately, like, I don't want to be adjudicated on my singing and dancing, so it doesn't happen in front of my family. Not even happy birthday. Like, I'm like, you guys got this one. But I want to build on this conversation because I think this highlights a bigger portion of work that you've done, which is building curriculum for a client who is on this journey. And so, as part of Precision Nutrition, and I imagine what you're doing now with the Simple app is that correct? Simple app?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is to help clients stay on track despite real life chaos. Somebody handing you a bag of poo, whatever it is. So I'm curious just about your role in that position and what you go through as like thinking out the possible side quest flexibility needed to allow people to be successful. So I imagine you as kind of like Oz behind the curtain, pulling strings, but ultimately the goal is to have a cohesive and comprehensive client experience. And so can you touch on that mindset of how you're preparing for these possible obstacles for clients and anticipating what I would call the siren call that just too many things have come up and now I want to quit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a huge question. It really, like, you could spend your lifetime really figuring this out, but I'll give some kind of key principles. The number one is really, it's funny because a friend of mine calls me the human composter. Just basically, you can kind of feed me any human experience and I will compost it into something good and useful, right? Um, and I think like having an attitude of non-judgmental, normalizing acceptance about the human experience is like that's you gotta lay that down like a tarp, right? Like, when you're painting, you have the painting cloth, right? So you have to lay this down like your initial painting cloth as like, this is my fundamental stance in relation to you. Whatever you come up with. Now, accepting doesn't mean I like it or that I think it's a great idea, but we have to be very reality based, right? I always tell clients, like, if you feel frustrated, frustration means that you are arguing with reality, and reality will always win. So you can keep arguing, that's your business, right? but reality will always win. So we have to begin with this kind of like open acceptance of reality. When I work with military clients, I talk about knowing your terrain, right? So maybe before a mission, they gave you a map and some instructions, and they were like, okay, the conditions are going to be like this, right? And you drop in and you're like, no, they're not. Right? The map is out of date. Something's been washed away. Like, the conditions on the ground are totally different. Now, are you going to sit down with your map and cry because it's not like what they told you? Or are you going to just like toss the map and get to business, doing whatever it is you need to do, right? So they understand that really intuitively. So the first thing is get yourself acquainted with reality. What is your life really like? Like, let's get super real about this. We both know, you and I, you're not going to get up at 4 a.m. and go to a boot camp class consistently. Let's be real about this. You got 3 kids, you work full time, you got your aging parent, like whatever it is in your life, we have to have a radical confrontation with your reality. And people are like, in the beginning, they're like, it's a little bit scary, but then they're like, oh, I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved that I don't have to feel like I have to get up at 4 a.m. and go to a boot camp class to make this work, right? So piece number 1, accept reality. Piece number 2, normalize the struggle. So to say to people, look, if you're lifting a heavy weight, it's gonna feel heavy. Or if you're trying to lose weight, sometimes you're gonna be hungry. Like, I feel like for some weird reason in the fitness industry, we have this pretense of like, it's going to be easy. Like you're going to, lose weight without feeling hungry, get strong without struggling or sweating or hurting a little bit. So normalizing the fact that sometimes this is going to suck and it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. That's another huge piece. So that's kind of part of the growth mindset, right? Struggle and suffering and setbacks are part of the process, like unavoidably part of the process. So if you're struggling and suffering and sucking, good job. Because it means that you are engaging, right? John Berardi always used to say, he used to call it fat burning mode when people were hungry. He used to tell them, "Oh, that's great that you're hungry. Now you're in fat burning mode," and that would immediately switch people from, "Oh my God, I'm hungry. I must be doing something wrong, and I'm freaking out," to, "That's why this guy is in fat burning mode," right? Like it completely changed their understanding of the situation. So I try to use concepts like courage, right? You are courageously facing something that's difficult and uncomfortable. I use concepts like the goal is not to do the thing. I mean, great if you do the thing, like do the workout. The goal is actually to push through the resistance to doing the thing. And jujitsu is a great example. I used to go to a morning jujitsu class, right? 7 in the morning. And it's hard to kind of organize yourself to get out the door to a jiu-jitsu. You got to find your gear and all this kind of stuff. So I started making it like my goal. My goal is not to get to this class. My goal is to get out the door on the way to this class. And then statistically, right, I'm probably going to make it. But all I have to do is get through 5 minutes of pushing through that resistance. So that can be really helpful for people. Like, we used to have quite a number of people who, like, they couldn't start by just going to the gym. They had to start by drive to the gym, sit in the parking lot. And a lot of them would sit in the parking lot and cry. This is actually surprisingly common. Maybe not surprisingly, but it's a common thing. They would sit in the parking lot and have like big feelings, right? And then cry and go home. And then it would be like, okay, get to the parking lot, cry, get to the front door, turn around and go home. And eventually they would make it into the gym and, they would progress to doing a workout. But allowing people to have those incremental progression steps that are way, way less than you would expect is really, really key too. So maybe the resistance to getting in the gym is too hard to overcome. That's okay. Your goal is to just get in the vicinity of the gym, and then over time we can build. So shrinking the change is really, really key as well. I just had a client who was like, "Oh, I said I would do 10 minutes of meditation and I didn't do it. Now I feel like an idiot." I'm like, "That's way too much. 10 minutes? That's crazy. That's way too much, right? Just tell yourself you're going to just sit there and space out for 30 seconds. That's your goal." "Oh, okay. I can do that." So really helping people understand that, you just want to do a thing, but it has to be super tough. It just has to be enough that you can get over the threshold to do it. So there's sort of different concepts embedded in there, but most of them are kind of like counterintuitive to how I say the general we in the fitness industry offer it to people, right? You got to go 75 hard. Perfect example. Give me a break. I think we should be doing 7.5 easy. Do you know what I mean? Like, get through 7.5 days, make it easy. We'll call that a win, right? So we always, we make it hard. We make it strict. We put a bunch of rules. Like we throw up all of these barriers layered with this like icing of judgment, right? No excuses. People would rather pay for cable than for healthy food, blah, 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 like all this judgmental crap, right? So we're flipping all of this on its head. Open acceptance, compassion, empathy, reality-based, shrinking the change. The goal is to just get you to do something, pushing through with the understanding that over time, it'll build. Just put a brick and a brick and a brick and a brick, and eventually you have a wall, but you can't just confront people with the whole wall right in the beginning. So that covered a lot of ground. Please feel free to, ask me to expand on any of those.
Having gone through that curriculum, even on the coaching side, when you're teaching us how to be coaches, it's so well thought out. And so I have a question about maybe two different ends of the spectrum, two challenges that I've just come across. One would be avoiding the overcorrection, or helping a client avoid an overcorrection when, say, they eat too much cake or they don't hit the whole 10 minutes of meditation. And so now they're doubling down their efforts because they feel like they're in a net negative. And then the other side would be how to manage the momentum for clients who want more now faster, to not let that lead them to burnout or making the change so large that all of a sudden they're just rolling down a cliff.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Okay, so let's take the first one. So how do you avoid overcorrection? The analogy that I like to use, I think people almost immediately get most of the time, is I'll say, okay, how do you drive? Like, how do you drive? And they're like, well, like this, right? I'm like, yeah, right. So as you drive, you make really tiny adjustments, right? Or how do you ride a bike, right? Little tiny adjustments, right? You do not wing the steering wheel or your handlebars all over the place, right? So it's like, you're making a right hand turn. You don't like immediately wing the steering, like, and so they intuitively get that. They're like, oh, okay, right? Yeah, see, that steering wheel thing is what you're doing with your food. You're all over the road right now. You're wiping out on your bike. So I find that analogy is an absolute winner because people intuitively understand, aha, it's got to be small deviations. So that's kind of piece number one. Another analogy that I like to use is something like, if you stub your toe, do you immediately just take a hammer and like smash your whole foot? No, that would be, or like you get a flat tire and then you immediately take a screwdriver and just like stab the rest of your tires. No, right? So you use an analogy that shows the ridiculousness of somehow taking big sweeping actions in the face of a small problem. And once you kind of hit on the right metaphor, depending on the client, they're usually like, oh yeah, okay, I see. Or, hey, you made a dumb purchase for $20. You immediately go and then buy a $20,000 something or other to fix it. No, it doesn't make sense, right? So if you hit the right metaphor, people will generally understand, like, oh, okay. You dial down the threat level. And you can also speak to the emotions people are experiencing. Like, yeah, you know what? I understand. A lot of stuff comes up for you, when you do this. Okay, you had a binge episode. I understand now. You're going to feel a lot of guilt or shame or regret, maybe panic, frustration, whatever it is. Let's kind of pause in those feelings a little bit and just sort of let them be there without trying to fix them, right? And understand that the more you try to fix, the more you reinforce the cycle. And sometimes I'll draw this out for them, right? Do a thing, feel panicked, stressed, upset, distressed in some way. Oh no, now I need to fix the distress. What do? My stress coping behavior, right? And then it just puts us right back into the cycle. So if you can draw that out for people and show them every time you cope with distress by doing something that gives you more distress, you are keeping this cycle in place. So let's do something that actually dials down the distress. So for example, after an eating episode, maybe we practice self-compassion. Maybe you go for a walk. Maybe you do something that like just reboots you. I used to have a coach that would make us do 5 push-ups. If she ever heard us saying anything self-critical, we would have to do 5 push-ups, not because push-ups are punishment, but it just reboots you. Right? So anything to reboot the brain somehow can be helpful. So that's piece number one. So piece number two with the how to manage momentum. So one of the first things I say is, you can be team captain if you want, but not on your first day, right? So how do you get to be team captain? You show up to practice, you have a good attitude, you put in the reps, you demonstrate leadership, like all of these things, right? So it takes time to be team captain. So if you want to excel in whatever it is you want to do, if you want to have the hard tasks and the big challenges, amazing. I'm totally here for that. I will challenge you as much as you want, but you can't get that on your first day. Right? You have to work your way up the chain to this. So I'm absolutely willing to do that for you, but you have to get there. I think people intuitively understand that, but also I will say to them, tell me in the past what has unfolded for you when you do things all or nothing, or when you bite off this huge chunk and try to chew it, when you do the extreme diets, the extreme workout programs, whatever it is. The person will, like 100% of the time, say, oh, it went great for 3 days or whatever, until I hurt myself, or until usually it's something catastrophic, right? Or it's complete crash and burn. And so then I'll kind of be like, hmm, like what do you make of that? Was that a useful strategy? And what are the good things that we can extract from that? Maybe you are someone who loves to be engaged and challenged and chase something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. Yeah, let's keep that in your program while avoiding some of the more negative consequences of that. Or maybe you realized you don't want to do that at all. Maybe you would much rather prefer a slow and progressive program. But either way, let's look at the evidence of your experience and see what that tells us about what is helpful for you in terms of how to do this. And generally, most people, as soon as you say that, will be like, yeah, I hurt my shoulder so badly, my arm fell off, or, I put myself into a disordered eating spiral, or, whatever it is, like they will immediately go, yeah, that was not a good idea, right? So it just somehow takes, again, it's that connecting the dots. What did you do? What were the results? Let's use that to make our decisions going forward.
One of my college professors, when I was in grad school, used to always talk about the Emperor's New Clothes, the old, fairy tale. And he would say, it was the little boy who pointed out that he wasn't wearing clothes. And the point was, everyone around can see the obvious thing, that this emperor is naked. But it wasn't until like the obvious that they actually realized for themselves, like, oh shit, I'm not wearing clothes. So just letting clients kind of recognize that experience and not just being like, kind of just pointing off to the side, like, hey, it's just, to me, you talk about letting them just come into that awareness very organically.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes if necessary, like I said earlier, just poking the pain point a little bit, like in a gentle sort of nudgy way, like in a way that almost like you almost pretend to be dumb, right? Like, I wonder, like, well, like that sounds cool that you did that crazy thing. Like, well, how did that go? Like, I'd love to know. Like, you almost play dumb a little bit, and then they're like, oh, well, to tell you the truth, it was a terrible disaster. You're like, oh, wow, really?
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about female athletes.
Mm,
I know you talked previously about getting women into training. You obviously do some work with GGS, Girls Gone Strong, for those that don't know. And one of the challenges I feel still is the societal pressures around body image and how, for some of the younger female athletes that I see, this can really create some mental blocks that inhibit performance.
hmm
And so, what is a strategy that coaches like myself can use to help their female athletes instead focus on, their strengths or what potential they have, and kind of just navigate this topic in a really sensitive way?
hmm Yeah, I'm so glad, that we're having this conversation because I think it maybe wasn't even on the radar for coaches 10, 20 years ago, right? And I think now that we're seeing a lot of very high profile examples of kind of the problematic consequences of this, I think people are really starting to say like, oh, wow, how do we bring our young athletes forward in a way that is like productive and helpful? So I guess the first thing I'd say is it has to start with you as the coach and the environment that you create. And I think, a lot of us walk around with beliefs, biases, assumptions, baggage, whatever that is, within ourselves that we need to decolonize, unburden, like unpack, whatever word you want to use. We have to look inside our own minds and our own behaviors and say, okay, how am I inadvertently, a lot of the time, participating in this somehow or reinforcing it? Again, I don't mean to, but because I grow up in this culture, like how am I accidentally reinforcing this or promoting it through what I say, through what I do, through the messages, verbal, nonverbal, implicit, explicit, you know, how am I creating this? And so I think it's really helpful for coaches to walk through the entire customer journey or the entire client journey. Like when someone finds out about you, what does your social media look like? If they go to your website, what are the images on your website? What's the messaging on your website? So like start there and walk through the entire experience. If I was a vulnerable young female walking through this, what would I see and hear and receive and perceive and interpret from your whole like online presence, physical presence, all of that stuff? So that's kind of piece number one. And I think, a lot of coaches haven't decolonize their own brains in this, right? So they might make social media posts like, oh, I woke up today, not feeling perfect because I had a roll hanging over my belt, but I want to share that because I accept it about myself. It's like, whoa, like that still reinforces the problem here. So like, do the work. You know what I mean? Like as a coach, we have to always be doing our own work. That is our responsibility in the role that we have. Okay. But then, it's also worth thinking about, as the coach, you're the leader of this environment, right? You are responsible and you're the leader of this environment. And so leadership is really, really key. So don't be passive about this. Don't just be like, oh, well, I'm a nice coach, so I'm sure that all my athletes are having a good experience. That is a weak position. You have to attack this aggressively because, your athletes are marinating in it all the time. So it's almost like, let's use another jiu-jitsu example. If I'm doing a particular movement, I have to account for the momentum of my opponent, right? So there's a certain kind of sweep where I have to fall to the side, but the opponent is pushing me back. So I kind of end up at a 45-degree angle, right? But I have to overcorrect. I have to shoot for a 90-degree angle and get a 45. So as a coach, you almost have to overcorrect. So add a little extra force, add a little extra boost to compensate for what your athletes are going to be dealing with in the outside world. The next piece is that this has to be explicit. So someone comes into your facility, into your online space, whatever it is, you say explicitly, here's what we are doing and here's what we are not doing, right? So here we focus on this, this, and this. I'm going to focus on your strength, your performance, your attitude, whatever it is. I am not going to focus on whatever, how you look in your, uniform or whatever. And we're going to get real clear, and I'm going to reinforce that every time we interact with my verbal cues, with my nonverbal cues. I'm going to be very, very aware of the cues that I'm giving. I will say, looking strong, here's a technique tip. I'm not going to comment on your body. I'm not going to comment on your weight, on your body fat. I mean, I have worked with athletes where they had male coaches who put them into like appalling hormonal states because the coaches were fixated on body fat rather than power. And a lot of these athletes were in power sports where you need a big engine. You need to have that engine be really robust. And the coaches were so focused on body fat, they effectively destroyed the bodies and the performance of these female athletes. So it's not just kind of like a nice thing to have because we're good people. If you don't focus on your female athletes and all athletes' capabilities, you actually make their performance suck. You know what I mean? So like, even if you're the most cynical coach, if you focus on appearance, if you focus on, like all of that stuff, it's probably going to make your athlete's performance suck. So it's in your interest to focus on that. So again, think about your cueing, think about what you reward, think about what you screen for, right? Are you making your athletes do body fat tests? Are you making them do weigh-ins? If they don't have a weight class sport, obviously if they do have a weight class sport, if they have a weight class sport, are you helping them manage their weight intelligently? Are you trying to get them into a weight class that is ridiculous for their height? Would you be better off focusing on building density, right? A big engine rather than just body weight. So there's a lot there to unpack, but the key points for me are unpack your stuff as a coach, be super aware of the entire experience that your athletes are having, and make those cues very explicit. This is what we focus on, this is what we reward, and this is what we don't reward. So if you come into my facility and you're like, oh my God, I'm so fat, I hate myself, I'm shutting that down immediately. We do not reward that mindset. And we emphasize that it weakens you. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to perform as an athlete and you're constantly like, oh no, my tummy, like you can't execute. Right? So to emphasize that focus actually weakens you. It doesn't strengthen you.
I'm curious on your thoughts, kind of continuing on this track, because I think this is a really powerful line of thinking. We have female athletes in a variety of sports, some in power sports, like you mentioned, where it is really advantageous for them to have maybe more muscle mass than some of their peers. compared to others where endurance is favorable and there are certain adaptations that we're looking for with that. And one of the things that I think I experience, because I work with a lot of high school, is the compare and despair trap of, oh, Lucy's so thin, I wish I had a body like her, but I'm doing this sport. And it's, how do we navigate this, like look like an athlete, because that can take on many different forms.
Yeah. Okay. Here's what you do. You go and you find the Sports Illustrated issue, and this is
Yes.
old. It's like 20 years old. You go and find the one they did of all the different body types.
Is it 20 years old?
Oh, it's ancient. I mean, maybe
Oh
it's
gosh.
it's older than you think. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
I forget who the photographer was, but this is a very classic thing. It's all over the internet, and it was photos of different male and female, different athletes with different body types, and the range is like incredible. Like little tiny trampoline people, big huge sumo wrestlers, everything in between. You go and you find that and you put it up in your gym. Right? So that's like the opening. That's your opening bid. But then, a lesson that I took from boxing, actually, in particular, but also martial arts in general. Martial arts is a place where every body has advantages and disadvantages. So there's no good body for martial arts. That's an environment where there's no specific advantage. And that's a topic of conversation. The coach will say, okay, you have long arms, so this technique is going to be better for you. Oh, you're shorter, so this is better for you. And then also you're shorter in relation to a person with longer arms. So now this dynamic, you need to have this game plan, right? So there's an understanding that this body serves this purpose, and I'm going to highlight and amplify for you what the strengths of it are, right? So when you have those conversations with the athletes, you identify and you call it the strengths of every body. This person has a ton of power because they have just the physics of it, right? Force equals mass times acceleration is something I always tell the bigger athletes, right? You are a power puncher. You have a bigger axis, to turn, and so you can deliver much more power. So explicitly celebrate all of the unique features of each athlete is an amazing and super important start, because I think also as coaches, we implicitly or explicitly reward different bodies, right? Even if we would swear up and down we're not doing it, research shows that teachers and coaches often do behaviors that they're unaware of, right? So maybe, the kid in class or the athlete that you like more, you give them more attention, even though you don't realize it. So really start to become aware of, like, what am I praising? What am I naming as a desired characteristic? Am I helping my athletes identify their specific unique strengths? Am I making them feel proud of their biomechanics, of their size, of their features, of what you have? Great speed, you have great agility, you're this person, you're that person. And then there was another piece I wanted to call out. Different body types. I've lost it. I'll come back to it, but I think that's really, really key, and that's not something that you hear. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If an athlete has to have a certain, or how to say this, if there is a certain size, shape, weight, physical configuration that is advantageous for a sport, separate the athlete from that and help them think of it more like a job qualification. Here's a thing we have to do to jump through a hoop, but it has nothing to do with you as a human being. Now, adolescents will take this on regardless because, developmentally, that's just what they do. But as much as possible, we want to separate those things. Okay, to get this job, you need to know Excel, you need to speak French, you need to whatever, right? Like, we understand that to do a job, you need to have certain qualifications. Let's do that with bodies, okay? All we're doing is a job here, and so, it's like a PT test. To get into the military, you need to do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups, or whatever it is. It's just job qualifications. So let's separate you from the job qualifications, and you get to decide if you want to sign up for these job qualifications. Maybe there's another job that's better for you. Like maybe if you're trying to do gymnastics and you're like 6'2", 250 pounds, maybe women's gymnastics is not for you, and maybe we can get you into a sport that's a little bit more appropriate. And one of the things I do when I do talks, and I have a female version of this and a male version of this, is that I show the best marathoner in the world and one of the best heavyweight wrestlers in the world. And they're typically actually not that dissimilar in height. But I show these two bodies like right next to each other, and I'm like, okay, these two people walk into your office as a coach. Do you tell the big one that they need to lose 100 pounds to run the marathon? And do you tell the marathon one that they need to gain 100 pounds to succeed in wrestling? No, that's obviously ridiculous, right? Let's help our athletes find the sports that really help them thrive. So maybe you have an athlete that's trying to do something that's completely like a mismatch for their natural configuration. Part of me as a coach would be like, you know what? You suck at tiny people things, but you're built like a platypus. So maybe let's get you into swimming or something. You know what I mean? That might be an option too, depending on what stage the athletes are at.
Hey, you're
There we
back.
go. Okay. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. My whole internet just died out of the blue.
Oh,
So what did you, where did it end off?
no.
Sorry about that. Classic
You're in the
timing.
middle of, no, it's good. It's kind of unfortunate, but I think maybe a good way to wrap up that question, especially going back to what you said early on, was this idea of the tarp you lay down being non-judgmental is don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Every person is going to have some unique strengths, right?
Yes.
And I think that identity is really important, and it kind of really just allows us to progress into this final question that I have you before we get into like our quickies. But sometimes for athletes, I talked about the injury piece and how critical this identity of me as athlete is for a lot of my high school kids. I think it's a very like I said, I mean, they're 15, 16, 17 years old. They're trying to figure out how to manage all this stuff. People are telling them what to do. They're also trying to figure out how to fit socially into the world and with their friend groups. Like one week I'm friends with Megan, and the next week we're not friends at all, because she said something bad about me. So it's like, there's so many things, but I want to talk about how we can help our athletes develop a more resilient, maybe multifaceted identity to support long-term performance, but also their mental health.
Yeah, it's a great question. And once again, I think it also begins with us as coaches, because a lot of coaches themselves are a little bit one-dimensional in the sense that you're embedded in your sport, you have friends in your sport, you socialize with people in your sport, right? Like your world is also a little bit one-dimensional a lot of the time. And so it begins with you and that kind of modeling of, hey, look, there's a life outside of this gym and this sport, and I don't take myself too seriously. Like when it's time to perform, yeah, maybe we get serious, right? Maybe we get down to business when it's time to do that. But then we hold the rest very lightly, right? And I had this one boxing coach many years ago. So try to imagine, he kind of had a George Foreman vibe, so kind of like a super thick, kind of bulldoggy kind of guy. And he loved crocheting. And so like imagine this big, scary, kind of like almost like a Mike Tyson looking guy, but crocheting. And he would have all of the things that he crocheted in the gym, like scarves that he worked on and stuff like that. And that was such a beautiful demonstration of like, I'm this person and I'm also this person. And so as a coach yourself, role model that to your athletes. I have this in my life and this in my life and this in my life. So that's piece number one. And then piece number two is, how can we get the people that we work with looking places like less inwardly and more outwardly? How can we get them engaged in the broader world, right? How can we see coaching as part of a broader community? What if, for example, CrossFit is pretty good about this. They tend to have a lot of charity events, right? Raising money for cancer, raising money for this, right? But like, there's no reason we can't do this in our sports, right? What if we have, one of the women's boxing gyms I trained with back in the day in Toronto was really good with this. They would have scholarships for vulnerable women from women's shelters or whatever coming in to learn boxing. So like, can there be a piece where you encourage volunteering, community engagement, bringing even younger athletes in, more vulnerable athletes in? Like maybe I don't know, you coach 16-year-olds, cool, let's bring in some 10-year-olds or even little 6-year-olds for a day, and you get to be the mentor and you get to see there's a world outside of you, right? You can be engaged in the broader world. So kind of thinking about coaching as almost like a nexus of community can be a big part of it. Or even stuff like, today we're playing music that so-and-so likes. So-and-so is really into music. And so I've gotten them to curate today's playlist. Now we have so-and-so is the athlete and so-and-so is the music fan. Hey, listen, so-and-so is a really good photographer. I actually wanted to take I framed one of their pictures. It's up on the wall of the gym or whatever, right? So really consciously cultivating and amplifying and celebrating those parts of those people that are not the sport, I think can be a really big, and it also encourages people to think of sport or their activities as something more than themselves, something more than their identity, something more than like, oh, this is all that I am. I'm someone who takes this sport, if I love the sport, and I give it to the world. I use the sport as a conduit for engagement with the world, for going on to do something good. The power of connection through the sport. How can we amplify that? There's all kinds of ways to do that. My God, bring your dog. I don't know, like bring your dog to the gym. That could be a disaster, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Bags of poo again.
Yeah, bags of poo. That's right. Oh my God. Or like partner with, there's been some great experiments with this around like people living in long-term care and old age homes, partnering them with young people, like bring in people for a day who are like 80 and want to practice a sport. I don't know, but somehow connect your athletes with a world outside of themselves. And obviously traveling is another important piece, right? Like a lot of sports teams travel. So like take the opportunity with that travel to do something cool, to show people again, there's a world outside of you and the sport. Because most of them are not going to go on to be elite world-class athletes. There has to be a life there. So the more we can cultivate that, I think, really the better.
I had a really interesting experience along these lines just this past week. So one of my college athletes is home, and somewhere along the way, her mom started training with us, and I found out that this athlete loves to do puzzles and Legos, loves to build
Aww.
Legos. And I'm like, how have I mean, it's hard. We've got, multiple athletes in there. We kind of run a groupish, semi-private format. So sometimes it's hard to have these conversations. But I was like, how in the heck did I not know this about this person? I'm like, that is so cool because my son's into Legos and we've like looked at all the big Lego sets. He spent a lot of my money on Lego sets, so but it was a really fun and just kind of off the wall conversation that it really felt like I was able to learn more about her as a person, and just something I thought that was really cool, separate from her identity as this like really awesome softball player.
Yeah,
And
that's a perfect example.
So I want to ask kind of one more question along this thread of, for our athletes who are really passionate and driven, how do we differentiate between kind of just a very passionate, focused athlete versus somebody who maybe overly identifies with this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, the literature actually distinguishes between healthy and unhealthy perfectionism or perfectionistic strivings. And the simple answer is, how does this make you feel? Right? Does this make you better? Does it make you worse? So if you're so gripped with perfectionism that you can't tolerate failure, you can't tolerate mistakes, every error is like a meltdown, a crushing, you're lying on the on the sidelines crying, like I'm exaggerating, but like, is this making you better or worse? Is this making you feel better or worse? So if you pursue this path in this way with this attitude, do you feel energized? Do you feel fired up? Do you feel excited? Do you feel joyful? Are you having fun? Are you able to be playful? Like, if someone can't be playful, that's a big red flag, right? Can I play with the athletes? Like, what are we even doing here? Like, it's a sport, right? Like, if you can't play when you're doing an actual literal sport, we got a problem. So, this is something you can investigate with very, very simple questions and explorations. And the people that love being challenged and driven, all that kind of stuff, they will experience it as fun, playful, engaging, energizing, all of those positive emotions. They'll be very creative. They'll be cooking up new techniques or new plays or whatever. The people that are experiencing it problematically will feel demotivated, demoralized, very rigid. you'll see a lot of cognitive rigidity, very inflexible in their thinking, or like you try to correct them and they just don't take, like, it's like, no, I have to keep doing it this way. They feel a lot of distress. There's a lot of upsetness. Like, everyone has a bad day, whatever. But if it's like a chronic pattern of like, this person is rigid, upset, distressed, not growing, they can't be expansive, they can't be creative, they can't learn new things, then it's a problem. So exactly what that is for every person is going to be different, right? People will be energized and engaged by different things. Like, one of the things I love is learning why things work. Why does this jiu-jitsu submission work? Like, what are the pieces of it that actually are making this go? For me, that's super interesting, and I actually really enjoy learning about that kind of stuff. For someone else, it'll be something else. Maybe they like the energy of just like fighting or working really hard or challenging themselves or whatever. So, but it's a very simple rubric. Is this making me better or worse? Do I feel good? Do I feel bad? And chronically. And that's kind of all you need to know. So if someone is like really, really driven, but they haven't lost their zest, great. One other piece that I will add is that one of the hallmarks of burnout is losing a sense of meaning. And so, as much as possible, we want to cultivate a sense of meaning for people. And meaning is very easy to lose in an athletic career. You start off doing something because it's fun, or you're with your buddies, you get outside, you're throwing the ball around, whatever it is. And then you wake up one day and you're 27 and you're like, I freaking hate this sport. It's dead to me. I never want to do it again. And that's unfortunate. That happens to a lot of athletes, right? So we want to keep people connected. A meaning can change. That's totally fine. But we want to keep people connected to the meaning and the purpose of this activity for them. Otherwise, what's the point? Why would you play a sport if there's no meaning in it? It's just purposeless.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I just want to finish with a few questions. They can be short answers or as long as you want. And the first one does not necessarily have to be related to what we covered today, but it's kind of a fun one for me. So if you could text every coach in the world, or, you just had a singular message, maybe on a billboard, to kind of distill a lot of, what's important to you down into just simple text, what would it be?
I would say practice compassion and empathy, because these things are not exclusive to performance. In fact, they're a core. You need them for performance. And by empathy, I mean you take perspective and you understand someone deeply, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what makes them tick. And compassion is like, I honestly see you, like, truthfully, clearly. I want to alleviate your suffering, but I recognize that's sort of, required for you. And these are the essences of high performance. Again, as paradoxical as it sounds. So practice compassion and practice empathy. And if you have that as a coach, I mean, that's like the whole base of the iceberg. On top of any other skills that you have, the biggest predictor of your success as a coach is your ability to form strong and safe and secure and supportive relationships with the people that you work with. And compassion and empathy are like the two biggest building blocks of that. So practice compassion and empathy. That's 4 words, I guess.
That works. No, that is super powerful, especially for me, because I know sometimes in my head I'm mentally like, you need to be tougher, like go harder. And going through the PN2 curriculum, it was a really eye-opening experience. And what I can speak to is not that this self-compassion was like the hippie teacher, like you talked about earlier, where it's just loose and free flowing, maybe not, like whatever. But I almost think of it as, instead of this like white knuckled grip, it's almost like a knot where it's tight enough to stay together, but still loose enough to move. And so I kind of have this good balance of structure and focus, but also the compassion pieces in there to allow for space and grace.
I love that. I love that. And compassion is a mediating factor in high achievement. Like, without it, past a certain point, it is impossible to achieve to some degree. And again, maybe there's some like 1% weirdo that can do it without it. But by and large, you're going to meet so much suffering in your athletic career that you must meet with compassion if you are going to have sustainability, because past a certain point, if you don't have that compassion, you're going to grind to a halt. And it's just going to be a total parking brake on your performance.
Okay. So what is one thing you've changed your mind on recently in the past couple of years?
One thing I've changed my mind on, okay, I wouldn't say I've changed my mind on this so much as I have downgraded my belief about whether it's even relevant. I've come to believe after so long in coaching, details very rarely matter. Now, let me be super clear about this. There may be really crucial details of technique, and jiu-jitsu is a great example of that, right? Like the people that get to be black belts are black belts because of details like they can sense weight, very subtle weight shifts or pacing, or like there's very, very tiny change that they can attend to. But details like exactly how many grams of protein am I consuming? Right? Exactly how many grams of carbs? Exactly when do I eat this? This is astonishingly irrelevant. And I think that a lot of people keep trying to find the magic formula. Like, oh, when should women train around their menstrual cycles? Guess what? It depends. Most of the time doesn't really matter. If you're feeling bad, have an easier day. If you're feeling energized, go for it. Like that's all that we can really say. And so I think that, again, in North American culture, we have this real desire to like turn everything into a formula and to feel like if I can just nail this down, like the precise details, that everything's going to be great. Very, very few details really ever matter when compared to something like consistency or understanding the principles by which something works. Most of the time, that's what really matters. So instead of like, oh my God, I have to have exactly this much protein, put some protein in the protein hole, right? Several times a day. Like, and the consistency of that is what makes the magic. And kind of related to that is I used to believe that athletes and high performance people needed those details. And we're kind of told like, oh, these are like level 3, level 2, level 3 people. Athletes, half of them are living out of their car, or they're living with roommates, or their whole day is like get up, go to the gym, eat, shower, do laundry. Like they're 21 years old, living mostly out of their car, right? Best you can do is get a granola bar in them. Do you know what I'm saying? So like it's an absolute myth that the top athletes have incredibly detailed diets or training protocols. A lot of the time it's like they succeed in spite of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because they're young, they're genetically gifted, they're driven, and they come to practice. Like that's really, I've heard people joke that like, you know, being an athlete, just basically a successful athlete involves like an obsessive fixation and then anabolic steroids. And I'm like, you know, that's a little harsh, but like that is probably a significant proportion of many people's success. But like showing up to practice consistently counts 1,000 times more than like exactly how many grams of protein. So that's something I've shifted on, and I've kind of come to the place where I'm like, I don't think I have found the person who needs that super detailed protocol. I actually don't think that person exists. I think there are people who like it, but I don't think there's anyone who needs it. So haters on the internet, please feel free to come for me, but like but I challenge you to demonstrate, you know, a case where that actually is true.
I can't even believe we ended up here, because some of my parents will ask me, what, like, can you get a meal plan for him? I'm like, look, I don't, like, we're going to improve his nutrition. Okay. He's a 15-year-old boy. I know he's going to like smash candy and Mountain Dews with the boys on the weekend. Totally fine. But like, have you watched Monday Night Football? Because I feel like McDonald's has fueled the performance of more athletes, because I've seen them walking in with bags of McDonald's more than anything. Or, you know, DK Metcalf is talking about his diet. He's like, yeah, you know, I eat a couple, like 4 to 5 bags of candy a day. Like he's setting sports science back like 10 years. But this is the reality, you know, and it's kind of funny when you really think about it.
There was a baseball player, I forget who, but he had a thing for like powdered donuts, like little mini powdered donuts, and he would consume like dozens of them before a game. There have been pitchers who played on acid, you know what I mean? Like athletics is a really Wild West kind of world, and I think the people that really want to get into the details are people who are not in that world. They're kind of like affluent professionals who are like, could I be optimizing my longevity newsflash, you're going to diet, probably doesn't matter. But like, I think that there's kind of a sphere of people who are obsessed with those details as if those details make a difference. But by and large, I have yet to be convinced of the case that for any metric of success, especially long-term success, those details really, really matter when compared to something like consistency, showing up to practice.
I don't want to lead this question too much, but you've seen a lot of trends come and go. We've already talked about a few, but I anticipate maybe this will be some excitement around the work you're doing now with Simple. But what is a current trend that you're seeing that you're really excited about?
I think that, I don't know if I'd say I'm super excited about this, but I think that we have really changed our perception of what older athletes are capable of, and female athletes too. Like, there was a woman who just ran an ultra marathon literally while breastfeeding. Like, this is insane to me. I don't even know. I mean, ultras on their own are insane to me, and then to do it as a breastfeeding mother of a 6-month-old is just even like, that's in a whole other dimension. But I think that we have really come to adjust our understanding of like what is possible for women and what is possible for older athletes. And it seems like the edges of the bubble just kind of keep getting pushed further and further outwards. And so I'm really excited about, like, because I used to hear people say, like, when I started out in the 90s, they were like, oh, women can't do this and blah, blah, blah. And now in 2025, as we're having this conversation, I'm like, success in athletics requires almost like a generational talent pool, right? It's like, if you have a lot of top athletes, they're the children of athletes. And, so you kind of almost need like 2 or 3 generations of investment in a talent pool to have, the baseline genetics, to have the early life environment, the cultivation. Now mom takes you to the field, the course, the track, whatever. And so I think that we've seen just so many significant changes in what we realize female athletes can do, because again, we've had these decades now of development, and what older athletes can do. Now we have like 101-year-olds running sprint races, right? Setting records. Because again, you're the only 101-year-old, right? But I think we're now like, oh, like, old people don't just have to lie down and die, like after 25, basically. So for me, that's super exciting. And I think that we're learning a lot about what you can do as you get older to kind of balance, like, yeah, you can push yourself. Yes, you can build muscle. Yes, you can learn new skills, and you can also keep yourself safe while you're doing it. But I don't think that we know the limits of performance for humans in general, but especially for these kinds of groups that have not traditionally been involved in athletics. So I think that's what I'm excited about.
No, that's really great. And turning 40 this year, so it's like very much on my mind of like, when's the drop off coming?
Yeah.
But so far it seems okay.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. Thank you again so much. It was a huge honor to have you on. I love this conversation. I know there's going to be so many valuable nuggets that people are going to take away from this. So for somebody who wants to connect with you or learn more about your work, where should I send them?
Yeah, I mean, you can just Google Krista Scott-Dixon, because there's only one of me in the world as far as I know. But I mean, I'm on the usual places, right? Facebook, Instagram. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. Who goes on LinkedIn? I don't know. It's truly one of the worst platforms. I farted around a little bit on TikTok, but I'm in the usual places. So Google me, you'll find me. I'm the only one. It's not that hard.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to getting this out to people.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review us with 5 stars only. Then subscribe so you can get all the latest updates.